Hi, I'm Jennifer, here at the American Patchwork and Quilting Sewing Lab with Handi Quilter Ambassador Angela Walters, and we're talking about geometric quilting designs. Now, geometric quilting designs really are the hallmark, I think, of the modern quilt movement, but traditional quilters like to use them as well for quilts that maybe they want a more masculine feel on. So let's talk about what some of those designs might be.
Great. Well, first we're going to talk about the geometric all-over design. This is one of the first free motion quilting designs that I learned almost 10 years ago. It's very beginner friendly. You don't have to worry about getting yourself caught in a corner because you can just cross over those lines. And like you said, it adds a nice geometric look to any quilt.
Sort of the modern version of stippling.
Pretty much, yeah. And then we're going to talk a little bit about square chains, where we take that same boxy shape and just make it a little bit more regular and fill in shapes that way.
Great way to use it in a border.
Absolutely. And then we'll talk about how to offset those shapes to give it a different look.
Let's get started.
Yeah. So first, the geometric all over. Again, we talked about how this is great for beginners because you don't have to worry about getting yourself stuck in a corner. You can also scale up the design however works best for your quilt. So if you want to make it larger as an all over, or shrink down the design and use it as a filler behind blocks, that works as well too.
How do you, or do you worry about getting those points on your corners as you're making those boxes?
That's a great question. I don't worry about having them be perfectly pointed, but I know that some people really do like that look. And so what I'll express to my students is when you're going into those corners and you're making that kind of right angle turn, you want to hesitate in the corner just a fraction of a second to let it take that stitch right there, and that's what will give it that nice crisp corner. Also, if you're using a stitch regulator, you want to make sure that you hesitate there just a moment to let it make that stitch. If you don't, you'll get a little bit more curved look, which I like to quilt fast, and that's how mine end up looking. So I just say that that's a design choice, but that if you're wondering why it's not looking so crisp on the corners, try taking that hesitant little break.
I also have a need for speed, so that's good advice.
Absolutely. A lot of people are not confused, but a lot of people think they have to use rulers for something like this, which I do use a ruler from time to time. Here is an example of a ruler that you would use on a long arm quilting machine. However, for these designs, I wouldn't worry about it. They're small lines, you're not going very far, and if you had to stop and readjust your ruler for every turn, you're going to be slowed down quite a bit. So
right.
For this example, we won't use any rulers.
And you're stitching in a lot of different directions. The one thing I'll say about rulers is this is specifically made for long arm machines. It's not your typical ruler you'd use with a rotary cutter, and I think that's a common mistake people sometimes make
You have to order, and what makes it different is a little thicker, so it won't go under your hopping foot.
Well, let's start stitching.
Yes. Okay, on the machine, I have an example of, a more geometric type quilt. It's actually a panel, and we'll just start with the geometric all over that we talked about, and we'll do it like it's a filler.
One of the things I think people often don't think about their quilting early enough in the process, and really, it's something you should consider as you're getting your top pieced. What do you want your quilting to look like? Do you want that geometric quilting to mimic the block shape, like where we have a square and a square design here, or do you want it to contrast? Do you want something curved on a quilt with lots of sharp angles?
Yep, there's no wrong answer. It's just whatever you like. But having that idea before you get started, I think you'll feel more comfortable quilting because you already have a roadmap.
Knowing where you want to go.
Yeah. So let's start with the geometric all over. And basically, I'm just quilting boxes like that, and then continuing past and going into the next. And I'm taking my time and hesitating just a moment in those points to give me those nice pointy, sharp turns. And you can just work your way around the quilt. And like I said, if you get stuck in a corner, you don't have to worry about it because you could just work your way back down or even cross over this if you needed to.
And I love that you're varying the shape of your boxes. They're not all the same, and you're not worrying about that.
Absolutely. I like it better when it's a little bit different shaped, and then I also want to try to be mindful that I'm not going in the same direction. I like it when a meander looks different, where you can't tell exactly where you went. But again, that's just my preference. Other people might have different preferences. So that's a nice, speedy, quick way to quilt a geometric all over. But if you took that same shape and quilted a little bit different, you could have what I like to call a square chain, in which you quilt the outside of a square, and you're working your way in so you get to the second, into the center. Now when you're all the way to the center, You're not going to stop like I did, but what you're going to do is actually go right across the lines into the next one. And this is a thing that people are always like, oh, she crossed the lines. But if you do it on purpose, then it's totally okay.
Right. We always say these rules are all made up anyway, so make up your own rules.
Yes. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cross right over and go right into my next shape. Now for this example, I'm just keeping them all pretty much the same size, but you could definitely vary the spacing or the size of it. This time I'm going to go down, and I've just taken that line out where I need to go and working my way in. Like that. And if you were working in a block like this, you could do the same thing. Just use the edges of that block as a guide and fill in with that design. Moving on.
I love that look.
This is one of my favorite designs because it's easy, but I think it looks really interesting, and I think that's kind of the holy grail of quilting. So let me show you how you can offset these a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quilt one, and then I'm going to space and then quilt another. Let me show you what that looks like. So again, I'm not using a ruler. I have a light grip on the machine, and I'm just hesitating in those corners a bit. They're not perfectly straight, but I'm okay with that.
And I learned in class that you should really be holding the handles more like you're holding an ice cream cone as opposed to having the death grip that you might have on the steering wheel.
Yes, yes.
When you're sliding on ice.
You're not going to help your quilting any by gripping it. You're just going to hurt your arm. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to fill in this space with another square. Okay, so I'm just filling in that space with another square and then coming over underneath that first one right there. So I have my row up here with this one filling in between them. And now I'm just going to continue that. So I have the space here. I'm going to throw in another one of those square chains or squares. Again, I'm not worried too much about keeping it perfect. I'm just going for it. I'm going to come along.
So you could do this in a border, or you could do it as an overall across your quilt top.
You can do it both ways, or you can even use it in the background of a quilt. If you have a quilt that has a lot of background, that's a great way to fill it in and just gives that little bit of interest to it. So here we have the same shapes, just used in a little bit different ways to really emphasize the geometric quilts that we do.
It's a terrific look. You've given us 3 great designs to look at. So have no fear, these designs will make geometry fun. And remember, it's hip to be square. Have fun quilting.